everyone. Welcome to this roundup. The SARS-CoV-2, identified as the causative agent of an outbreak of viral pneumonia centered around Wuhan, China, and now named as a COVID-19, is a full-blown pandemic impacting most nations. While this ongoing coronavirus outbreak is a terrible human tragedy at all levels, it is not just a health crisis, it is also an economic crisis of immense proportion. It is shaking up the global community and the global economy, and the impact is being felt across nations, its government, industries, organizations, and academia. In this unprecedented new global reality, we are witnessing a dramatic restructuring of the fundamentals in which the human ecosystem has traditionally operated. While how exactly this restructuring evolves remains to be seen, one thing is certain: the restructuring of the global economic order is imminent. Although battling the virus and eradicating it is of the utmost importance, there is a clear need to begin a discussion on how to navigate to the next normal, how to restructure the entire human ecosystem of cyberspace, aquaspace, geospace, and space, and how to bring the much needed resilience and transformation very focused to restructure each component of a nation. To discuss implications of COVID-19 on businesses, I'm delighted to welcome Dr. Badri Gopalakrishnan to this roundup. Dr. Badri and Gopalakrishnan, co-founder of Inspicium, is an experienced academic and corporate researcher, applied economist, policy business consultant, and currently affiliated with McKinsey & Company as a consulting economist. Welcome, Dr. Gopalakrishnan. We are very honored to have you in this roundup.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pandya. I'm delighted to be part of this wonderful forum, and I'm happy to share my thoughts on this, and looking forward to the interaction. Thank you.
Wonderful. So, with the spread of COVID-19, we are dealing with enormous uncertainty at so many levels. Everybody has questions like, will it be possible to go to work? Will factories be allowed to operate? Are businesses going to be open? What will be the impact of the economy or of our livelihoods? And will companies suffer? Are we going to go bankrupt? Will businesses go to bankrupt? Can the supply of essential goods and services be maintained? Will we even have a job? These and so many million more questions are racing through everyone's minds, adding stress to the already challenging reality of living in the time of this coronavirus. Everything has changed. Things normally that we have taken granted for are no longer possible as the pandemic continues to expand. What is the path to the next normal? What is the path to the new normal for businesses?
No, I think this is, I cannot agree more with you, because this is an extremely, unprecedented situation in terms of the immediate effect, and also the long-term effect that we are looking at, we are staring at. All the points that you mentioned are really valid, and I can probably discuss some of them one by one. The local businesses, restaurants, and any places that involve people gathering physically, they're all suffering a lot in the current times, and maybe in the coming months they're going to suffer even more. So that's a major change coming, and in terms of going back to work is again a big question mark. Definitely we are going to go back to work, but when? And the economy is going back to normal at some point, but when is that? We don't know yet. And when is, then the second question is, after the economy gets back to track, what happens to each of us as individuals? That is yet another question. So I think that's all very, very difficult. And however, I see some, probably I'll first explain some of the negative impact that we're looking at, and then come up with some silver lining, some positives to take away from. So the first thing that is happening, why is all this economic uncertainty happening? In addition to the health uncertainty, I'm even for now I'm even ignoring the health uncertainties like people dying, cases, and so on. For the moment, let's ignore that and focus on the masses, what all of us are facing, not just the people who are affected, the health wise, but economy wise, everyone is affected. So when you think about that, there are different channels in which things are getting affected. The first thing, as I mentioned, is anything that involves gathering of people, any business that involves gathering of people is severely affected. So tourism is taken a big hit. It has been explicitly banned because of the restrictions on movements and so on. So the entire tourism industry, which involves basically, if you think about it, tourism involves pretty much all goods and services, because when the tourists go to from one country to another, they're going to buy everything that the locals are going to buy. So all the fast moving consumer goods and transportation services and other lot of services, they're all going to be severely affected. I mean, not going to be, they are already affected. That is one. The second aspect is the shutting down of borders that actually affects movement of goods and services, and apart from people. So this actually affects a lot of day-to-day goods that we need. Like you are talking about essential commodities, and I think that is also a question mark. Thankfully, so far it has not been an issue. We have enough stock, and we have some production is going on. Production of essential commodities is going on, but to the extent that we are dependent on the global supply chain, we are going to be affected. If we for certain commodities we depend on some international sources, it's very likely that we are going to face some shortage in future. Like already a lot of us are maybe first generation or second generation immigrants from other countries, and we in the US, and we consume a lot of native products, indigenous products from our home countries. I think we have been getting a pretty seamless supply of those goods, but now given all the shutdown, that's going to be difficult. I'm talking about even some food products like basic essentials, like you mentioned. So I think that is a major issue. Trade is second aspect I mentioned. Tourism, second is trade. Third is production shutdown. So even domestically, things are going to be produced less. So we are going to face that shortage. As a result of all this supply reduction, we are also part of. All of us are both producers and consumers. Right? We are both consumers and producers. So as of so far, I talked about us as consumers. We are going to find it difficult to find certain commodities, goods, and services. But now think about us as suppliers, that we are part of the labor market, we are part of the capital market, we're producing things, investing on things. So from that perspective, again, there are going to be losses because of the changes in the supply side as well, right? We are producing less, so there are fewer jobs and less investment, so that is going to be affected. And similarly, we are actually um, um, uh, you know um, uh, uh, consuming people are consuming less. So one thing is production is shut down in many countries. Second thing is people are consuming less. So there is a supply side effect and there is a demand side effect, and all of this are kind of ramping up, one reinforcing the other. There is low supply, so there is low demand, so there is low demand, so there is low supply. So there is kind of a what we call as vicious circle that is kind of spiraling, and this is going on for some time, and it can become worse. So now coming to, I think these are I think I've talked enough about all the negatives, and I'm sure all of you already know about it. Probably I'm just giving it from an economist perspective. But thinking about the positives, one thing, of course, is like not positives, but some kind of mitigatory measures that countries are taking, the governments are taking. Yeah, there are some stimulus being injected to the economy, like in the U.S. has announced among the largest stimuli in the world, both in terms of fiscal and in terms of liquidity injections. And from my analysis, I can say that the kind of the GDP dip can be as high as 3-4% percentage points, and the extent to which we can recover through the stimulus can be at least half of that. Half of that can be mitigated, uh, just because of the stimulus. And how does that work? People who are out of jobs, they're going to get some unemployment benefits and some income so that they can continue consuming. So at least you can address the demand side effect there. And the essential commodities will be mandated to be keep producing, and you also some big companies that are failing may be supported through these bailout packages and so on. So all these are going to affect the economy at large. But I personally think that the more money is spent on common people for consumption, the more effective it will be, rather than just focusing on bailing out and so on.
Oh,
So
very true,
so
very true. See, you make some really good points about, of course, you mentioned a lot of negatives, which we all are, facing, industries are facing, businesses are facing, countries are facing, and also the global supply chain that you talk about. Yes, absolutely. The global supply chain is a huge problem because with the borders shut, and with the transportation industry, especially in the planes and, cargos and everything, coming on a standstill, how are we going to get what we need from the other countries? The supply chain, the entire global supply chain is impacted. The factories are shut down, so where the things are going to come from? So those questions are going to be very critical, for any, even if a country recovers from this pandemic. But if the other countries where the supply chain, where for which country's supply chain they depend on, if those countries are still shut down, it doesn't matter even if this country can open their businesses, because they just don't have for the products or whatever resources they need to build the products or to manufacture, they won't have that. So the industries that you talked about, like people cannot go out now, people cannot eat outside, all the restaurants and everything is shut down, all the tourism is shut down. For those kind of industries, it's going to be a bigger problem, because how long can they do that? All the people that they had employed, they all are laid off. Yes, many governments have come out with stimulus, like United States have come out with huge stimulus. The question here is, all the people who were paying taxes, yes, they all will be covered, somehow, and they will get a paycheck month to month. But in United States, if we talk about, we also have a lot of undocumented people. They are not, paying the taxes. A lot of them are not paying taxes. A lot of them are not having, any legal paperwork. So there is a huge fear for them. How are they going to survive? How are they going to pay rent? So those kind of, the question then emerges is, for that population and for the restaurant business and tourism and all, many of those businesses, that airplanes and how are they going, how long can they sustain without opening up? How long can they do that without having an economic shock through which they cannot come out, even if there is a stimulus or no stimulus?
yeah, I think the biggest trouble is that a lot of the small companies, small businesses that you mentioned, uh, I somewhere I read a study which said that on an average, a small and medium business is SMB is it has enough surplus only to manage like 1 or 2 months of working capital, right? So all the operational expenses and working capital and so on. So maybe 1 to 2 months they can manage with great difficulty, but beyond that it's going to be difficult. So there are going to be layoffs. There are going to be, I already hear, I know in our region here in Seattle area, many restaurants have actually gone out of business for good, not just for like temporary shut, like closed down, but like they just felt that it's just not sustainable, right? They just felt that it's,
Yes,
yeah.
very true. Because here also we are seeing that even the drive-through, they are keeping the business restaurants open, hoping that people will come pick up the food. Even if they cannot come inside. But the behavior has changed. The consumer behavior has changed. Everybody has started cooking at home, and that will not go away even if the pandemic probably goes away, and people will be able to come out, because the fear will stay there, whether they should go in public places, whether they should go in places where there are a lot of people. So when the behavior changes, all these industries, all these businesses, they cannot get back up. So you are right. I mean, I can understand why those businesses have, shut down for good. The restaurants have shut down for good because it is just not going to be sustainable. So for those kind of businesses, those kind of industries, how do they restructure? Because it's a new way of doing things they will have to come up with. It's a new way of providing services they will have to come up with, because people are not going to go in crowded places even when we things get better, because that fear is going to linger on. So how do those businesses restructure?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and I also have been following what is happening in China. China is a good example here, although not in all ways, but in certain ways, because they have kind of reopened now. And what I see there is that people are not, going out and doing the things that they usually do, despite the fact that malls have opened. All the usual consumerist businesses have come back. So I completely agree with you on that. It's going to be very very challenging and difficult. But actually, to the extent that it's kind of a, as I mentioned before, it's a kind of vicious supply pulling down demand, demand pulling down supply kind of problem. The best way to come out of it is some initial money. Somebody has to put in some initial money to come out of it, and that's why I'm talking about this stimulus package. Secondly, definitely the industries had to think about restructuring the way they are doing things. Maybe half the people who are not, like you said, the behavior is going to change, and among the people who are going to change the behavior, half of them may be saying that, I mean, just to give an example, half of them may say that, okay, I will, and I'm really looking forward to go out and eat because I'm just sick of eating at home my own cooked food, and I'm looking for the restaurants to open, the lockdown to be done with. And there are going to be such people, so they are going to be their usual customers, and probably, let's say, it's going down by 50%, like whatever they had before. Only half of them are going to come back. The remaining half may say that, I mean, maybe the quarter of the remaining half, they may say that, okay, no, yeah, I know everything is open, but I don't want to take any risk, like you mentioned. They say that, we just have to avoid eating out and so on. And like on that, there are two types of consumers, right? One type of consumer may say that, okay, I don't want to eat outside at all. I don't even want to buy some package from outside and eat it at home. And some may say, okay, I don't want to just sit in crowded places, but I am okay with ordering something online. It's like Uber Eats kind of stuff. Those consumers may exist. So that may be another part of the recovery. And then you are going to lose some customers, like you rightly pointed out, particularly the people who have already been at the margin. They're not so keen to go out, and they're more of home eaters, and now they just say, we just don't want to go out. And others who may say, okay, we have learned to cook and learned to do things at home, let's just continue this way, healthy kind of thing.
Yes.
So I think that is the thing. And now, in terms of what the businesses can do, looking at all these different customer segments, there are the one part of the customer segment, they just cannot do anything. So whatever they do, they're not going to listen to. They're not going to restart their consumption. But others, the people who are willing to continue consuming at home, if they get the supply, if they can get what the food at home. And so maybe there is going to be more and more e-commerce of these kind of products. I'm just giving restaurants as an example, because that's something that we all can relate to. So I'll continue with that example. But so maybe the Uber Eats kind of services can expand more, because right now, when I see, for example, look at Uber Eats, there are only a few restaurants that are connected with Uber Eats, but now you may see more and more of them connected with them, and maybe even the restaurants themselves may have some delivery services. They also may have some online order delivery. Like e-commerce is going to expand in a big way here. And secondly, maybe there's going to be more movement towards transparency in terms of this kind of restaurants. They're going to say that, okay, this is what we are doing. We are being very hygienic. Already there are many restaurants that are kind of issuing statements that we already follow very hygienic practices, and now we are being even more careful and so on. I even got some emails from some of those restaurants about this. And so I think that is another thing, like they're going to try to retain some of their customers, saying that no, you are completely safe if you eat with us. And the next level is probably they're going to change their business. Maybe they're saying, okay, we're not going to do restaurants, but if people are cooking at home, people are going to eat the same amount of food, but then they're going to eat more food. So maybe if they move, instead of supplying cooked food, they probably can start groceries, or more supply the raw foods rather than cooked foods.
Sure,
um,
sure.
so I
All
think, yeah, these are some examples I can think of. But I think at the end of the day, what I'm trying to say is that everyone has to think of, really deeply think in about their business, and think about these different customer segments, and try to come up with some solution. Some maybe a kind of a blended model would work the best. Probably they are going to have the old customers have their old business model, but for the new customers have the new business model.
Yes, and
So
the new customers and new competition will emerge because if they are going to just deliver food and it's going to be Uber Eats, then the lot of people who cook at home who are really good at cooking, they will say, why don't we just supply food? Why do we have to depend on restaurants? So Uber model, that Uber Eats model, the delivery model can expand, and if the home stay home, man, woman, who are good at cooking, who love cooking, they can start supplying. So there could be new competitors emerging, and this is not just about restaurant business, because I was thinking, I mean, there are a lot of these businesses who are already able to do work through the computer, through video conferencing, and through phones, and the for selling, for sales and marketing, and for many jobs. The people that used to go to offices, and employers had to have huge buildings, commercial buildings and offices for everyone, conference room for everyone. They're all finding out that they don't need those anymore, because people are working just fine through their home, using the Microsoft Meet or Google Meet, all those kind of video conferencing tools. They are just seeing each other through video conferencing. Those offices won't be necessary, those buildings won't be necessary, because they don't need to come to work. They can work from home, which is more productive and more efficient, and you can cut down so much operation costs. So there is going to be a huge restructuring on how to do things. And for all that, it's going to, for each business, each industry is going to require visualizing what different ways we can provide services now, products, what different ways we can build products, what different ways we can provide services to our and consumer and clients. So it's going to be an enormous restructuring of not just restaurant industry, or how to deliver food, how to provide food to the consumers. It's going to be an enormous restructuring, revisualizing for each and every role, each and every services and products, how to build, how to provide services for each and every industry. Do you see that happening already? Like businesses have started revisualizing how to do things in the coming tomorrow. What would consumer be comfortable with? How we can change entirely our business models? Do you see
yeah,
that?
yeah, I'm completely with you on that. And I was thinking of restaurants as an example, but it's going to happen across the board. And I have a particular way of thinking about this, which I think it's also shared by many others. Not necessarily a unique perspective, but it's about the fact that over time, we have been undergoing this digital transformation, right? The kind of calls we are having now, webinars and so on, we have been doing that for a while now. And we have already, over the past few years, we already avoided a lot of travel and commuting by people working from home. I know, for example, in companies like Amazon, they have pretty much like a complete, like thousands of employees in a division, which is like something like virtual customer care, where everyone in that, like starting from the senior vice president until the associate, everyone works from home, and they all coordinate through video conferences. And so this all these things have been existing for the past few years, but many companies have not caught up to that. They're not examined these modes of operandi. So now what is happening is, this process, whatever we are going through now, is kind of accelerating the digital transformation. The technologies exist already, but now people are beginning to use it. The companies that were not doing this so far, they're not thinking about doing that, and not thinking, they're forced to think about doing that. So sometimes, like, you think of 9/11, and the world before 9/11 was very different from the world after that. And a lot of things changed. The security increased a lot in the airports. We are doing the security check-in that takes a longer time, and so on. This all happened as a response to 9/11. The same way, this crisis is going to change the way the businesses are working, thinking, employees are working. And I think, in a way, the kind of silver linings that I was beginning to talk about earlier, one of them was that, if imagine this pandemic happened like 30 years ago, we would all have been in a much, much, much worse situation, in a way, because at least a large part of the economy, like the economy that involves management, strategic thinking, operations at a high level, or strategy, analytics, consulting. So these kind of businesses, software, they are pretty much running as usual, business as usual. We are all working from home, and business is running as usual. When I talk to all my friends in these industries, they say, oh, we are, if anything, we are just more busy than before,
Yes.
right? And the same holds for me and you, and for all people like us who are thinking at a high level, doing some strategic analysis and thinking, and so on. So I think this transformation is already there, and it is kind of accelerating. And it is, like, when I talked about restructuring of businesses, this is one of the ideas I was thinking, that the businesses should think, how do they connect with the digital economy? Whatever is their business model, how do they connect with digital economy? How can they make use of the digital transformations that are happening? Like I already saw that some of the recent numbers that have come out, the digital part of the economy is actually booming in the last few months, compared to the rest of the economy. The physical economy is kind of definitely dropping, whereas the digital economy is expanding. So that is a clear sign that, the digital transformation is close to complete now. And I mean, by the time we're going to come out of this crisis, education is becoming online already. Kids are studying from home. My 10-year-old daughter, she's actually, emailing the teacher and assignments and so on. She's having video calls, Zoom calls. She's actually more familiar with Zoom than I am. Right? So these things are happening in all sectors already. This the digital transformation is happening. Even telemedicine, even right now, the situation is in the healthcare is that they're so busy with COVID, our doctor friends. And the only way to, if you have other kinds of illnesses, it's kind of risky to go because of the situation now, social distancing and so on. So it's a nice time to explore telemedicine, and video conferencing with doctors and so on. So yeah, I think this is throwing up a lot of opportunities. And if the startups, the technology startups and so on, they can think of exploiting this situation and getting into some of these areas and actually solve these problems, right? And they're pretty much like social enterprises. They can work on solutions to all the problems we are facing in using digital technologies, and kind of evangelizing, or kind of, spreading the word about the good things of digital transformation. And
Yes.
I think that can mitigate a lot of the problems we are looking at. And going a little ahead of just simple digital transformation, like what we are talking about, webinars and so on. Even you can even think about things like 3D printing. Like, maybe that's the closest link between the digital economy and physical manufacturing kind of industries, right? Maybe, yeah, we can have peopleless factory, where people are, maybe you just need a very, very high level, highly skilled technical person who knows the artificial intelligence, robotics, automation, 3D printing, these kind of things. And everything is produced, and people don't even touch anything. They're just produced and packaged automatically.
Yes.
That is coming. I think that is what we have been calling as industry 4.0. That is coming. Now your question may be, okay, if you're doing all these things, it is like kind of very scary, because people are not people are going to be less and less involved in physical activities, right? physical workers, blue collar workers, they are all going to probably lose jobs. So what about that? And that's a very different question, and that is again a question we have been grappling with. We all know, all the policymakers, and business leaders, we all know that that is coming. And leaders like Jeff Bezos and other major leaders, they have been pointing to that, we have to be ready for massive automation and job losses and so on, and because they are all already working along this that direction. So now the situation then becomes, how to support the people who are losing jobs. So here there are two things. One thing is, like I mentioned, there are new ways of doing things, and you will still need physical people for, like, for example, deliveries. People are not going to go to shops, but you need people for delivery. And people are, and because of the new lines of businesses are going to kind of prosper, you're going to have a lot of money lying with some people, and they are going to have some very customized kind of tastes and preferences. And you will need people to support them. Like, I may, like, if I'm very skilled, and before all this happened I'm not much on demand, but after all this happened my service is on high demand, I'm earning a lot of money, and now my taste is going to be very, very kind of evolved, and I'm going to go for very, very specific type of restaurant, specific kind of taste I'm going to have, a specific type of entertainment services and so on. So people have to think about those things, and for them you definitely need people to be involved, like blue collar workers and so on. So that is one aspect, but that is not going to take all the slack of all the people who are losing jobs. So this is where I personally feel, as an economist, that this is high time we tried the concept of universal basic income. We have to make sure that, maybe the people who are losing jobs out of all this situation, if they can prove enough that they just cannot get a job, you persist with them, try to skill them, try to get them ready for the current job market and so on. But at the end of the day, they should not kind of die out of starvation. They should not. At least they should have their basic needs. The basic income should be guaranteed. If that is the case, then all kinds of automation, anything can happen. Then if they have enough food to eat, they're just going to probably do something that's creative, whatever they can, do. Like, you can see that the entertainment industry has become so much democratized, right? Anyone can start a YouTube channel, and you can have your own following, right? So I think more and more of those kind of things can happen. Like, people can just do what they love, they want to do, and they don't have to worry about income for the sake of it. And yeah,
Absolutely.
so that's, yeah,
Many,
I
many,
will.
many new ways of doing things, will emerge as you are just talking about. And the point that you made about that, thank God that the pandemic did not come 30 years back. That is an excellent point, because no nation was ready. Our, cyberspace was not ready. Our digital infrastructure was not ready. But now it is ready. I mean, there are still, a lot of tools and technology. We still need to develop processes. We need to establish policies, regulation, all that needs to happen. But we are almost there. So yes, lot of, continuity is there, that, we are not seeing businesses disrupting, most of them, because the digital infrastructure is giving us the continuity for our operations. But if we talk about the education infrastructure, I mean, in how in United States, Ivy League colleges to all these, number one rated colleges, each of them, cost so much for, tuition every year. Now the infrastructure is going to change. Now everybody, like, if this does not recover quickly enough, then probably next semester will not happen, then next year may not happen, if this pandemic still lingers on, because there is a risk of students coming on the campus. So yes, their mode of operations will need to change, the mode of education will need to change. So education industry will go through heavy disruption, and I don't think they were ready yet. It's going to create a lot of enormous challenges for all these colleges that dependent on international students and international tuition. So there is going to be a lot of disruption for this industry. And at the same time, yes, there are huge opportunities. But the point that you made about universal basic income, yes, I mean, we were all discussing that, as the automation takes over, we will need to start thinking about how people will start losing jobs, so how to give them universal basic income. Nobody imagined that because of pandemic we will have to push towards this, and we will need to provide some basic income for people who are losing jobs, who have no income. So yes, we are at that point, but the question of that is, will the who is going to pay that basic income? The governments. Where will the revenues come for the governments? So it's not just, and who will decide whether 1,200 or $1,500 per month for an adult is enough for them to live on? Because each city's standard of living is very, very different. So how are we going to define who gets what? So instead, I think the new models which we have discussed and which we have promoted over the years is we need to come up with an effective way of making sure that we pay consumers for the data they are generating, digital data, because all the data that we are generating, based on that, new products, new services are emerging, and the consumers should benefit from the data they are providing to all these digital companies. At the same time, the genomic data that we are providing, based on which new medicines are emerging, that also the consumers should benefit from the genomic data they are providing, they are sharing. So new these pharmaceutical industries and all that, they are able to come up with new drugs and new way of doing things. So we need to come up with new innovative ways. And I don't think universal basic income alone is going to be sufficient. We need to come up with new ways. So do you see that discussion happening in any of the nation? Because we have been promoting this, and we have been pushing for this discussion that just universal basic income is not enough in the coming years.
Yeah, no, I think the universal basic income itself is a very crude idea at this point. Nobody has flushed it out. Nobody has really thought the details on like exactly like what you said. And in terms of where the money comes from, they just have some notional ideas that maybe we can recover, we can increase the taxes on the rich and so on. But like some of the Scandinavian countries have the system to some extent in place. But I completely agree with you on the data, paying for the data and so on. I've seen some businesses have this kind of business model. You submit your data and you get paid for it, kind of business model. And because they are making money out of it, and they share some part of the revenue with you because you are sharing your data.
Yes.
And that is I think if companies like Google, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and these big companies, they start paying, I think probably, like you said, we may not even need UBI, universal basic income, because there is so much money out there. And I think that's a very, I'm completely supportive of this initiative. I think on this, it is more a business driven thing. This is something that businesses have to come up with these ideas and propose these ideas, and basically it's kind of to be tested in the market directly. And I see no reason why this would not succeed. I mean, this would be a big success because it makes sense for everyone. People are going to be happy because I've been giving my data away to these companies without knowing why they're using, where they're using, and not getting anything out of it. I know these guys are making billions of dollars, and now there's some company which is actually willing to pay me for that, and I'll definitely go with that company. So if it's just a matter of the strategies such businesses can take, like how are they going to scale? They have to learn from all the existing big tech companies. How do they grow? And they have to scale up, and they have to have a business model. Like, I mean, they cannot say that. I mean, they have to strike a balance between sharing the money with the people and making their profits. And I think it's doable. It's not like there is enough resources. There are enough resources when you pool every lot of people in the world. I think this can be a very successful model. And myself, I've been thinking of these kind of ideas, and discussing with some friends on how nice it would be to develop such platforms. They can even be linked. I mean, to begin with, they can be linked with this existing big platforms, but then they can be the intermediaries. So they get the data, and then they negotiate it. Eventually, they can grow so big that they can negotiate with the big companies. So it can become like an industry gold standard. So it's
Yes.
not only like this small part of the economy, but they can have some deals with the big companies so that they can actually get money from the big companies, and then they can give that to the share that with the people. So I
Yes.
think that is a great way to do it. And here I also think that apart from like I mentioned, businesses can have probably a lot of I would say kind of initiative and responsibility they can take to do this. But secondly, I also think the governments can play a very role here. We already have things like security regulations and privacy regulations and so on. If they can go a little ahead of that, like for example, I recently read about the doctors, like because of HIPAA regulation in the US, Privacy Act for health related stuff, and the doctors are not able to. Like there is a constraint on the doctors on how much information they can share even with the patients, and or their experience with other patients and so on. So there is kind of some transparency issue coming out of data security. Here, one solution people say is that maybe we can give the customers the freedom. The customers can decide whether they need privacy or not. Like whether I need privacy or not is something that I should decide, not the government, right? So when you give that kind of freedom, you give an option. You ask a customer, say, do you want to release your data or you don't want to release your data? If you release your data, I know you're kind of sacrificing something that you wouldn't otherwise do, so I'm willing to pay you something. If you don't release data, well, that's okay. That's your choice, right? And we are not going to pay anything. You're just going to avail the service. So I think this could be like a thing that needs some tweak in the regulations. The governments have to think about how much they have to go, how far they can go with privacy. If people are opening up about themselves in like Facebook or LinkedIn or Twitter, why not they open up to the doctors and to like other people, and maybe they can get some income out of that, because like data is gold. Data is a new gold. People say data is a new oil or new gold. People say because data is the basis of a lot of money that many
Yes,
big companies make.
yes,
So why should yeah, then why shouldn't the data points, the people who are the data points, why shouldn't they make money out of it, right? If that's the it's kind of, I mean, in economics we can take this to the natural resource economics. When the oil is owned by all of us collectively, so if oil is sold, all of us should get money from it, right? So that is kind of one tenet of natural resource economics. So now we can think of data as a new oil, and data is a collective thing. Like it's when you see a data that is 1 terabyte big or something, it looks huge, but then it came from every single person in the world or the country. So each of them has to get a share of it. Whatever the data is making, whatever revenue that the data is generating, some part of it should go to the the sources of the data, who is giving the data. So I think I think there has to be some policy initiatives on this as well, not just businesses. I mean, the policies are impeding some of this, and that's kind of, these policies also happen over time. They're kind of calibrated to suit certain business interests, knowingly or unknowingly. These things happen because many politicians may not be aware of all these details and the technology, and they would just go with the experts in technologies. And usually, the experts may have some kind of conflict of interest. They probably would come from one of these big companies, and they would have to, propound what is good for them, and that might become the law. So I think there is a need to revisit all these regulations from the government perspective, and from the business perspective, they need to start creating the demand for it, because right now there is not much demand for this kind of things. So if the businesses can demonstrate that this model can be successful, then people can go to the government and represent and say that, okay, now we are also a sizable community, we are doing this, and if you guys relax some regulations, we can grow much bigger, we can make it mainstream, and you don't have to worry a lot about universal basic income. I mean, you can worry, you still have to do that to some extent, but we can reduce your burden a lot, right? And actually, one thing I might say here is there has some countries have been toying with this idea, like the developing countries like India in particular, and South Africa, and some of the other countries, in terms of e-commerce and global trade. When you're buying something on Amazon online, right now there is no customs paid for it, even though it's crossing the border, because it's a package, it's just one package of a small thing, you don't pay. But now the government is saying that they're kind of saying that we have to think about taxing these, so that the government can make some money out of it, and that can be used for public welfare. And this is one thing. Second thing is, this is at least understandable, because I mean, this makes sense. If the goods are crossing borders, they have to pay. But one more subtle thing they are planning to do is even the digital transmissions. Like, for example, a consultant. I do a lot of work for organizations in Geneva or other places, and the only transaction I do is probably an email. I send an email with a report or data, and that crosses the border, not the literal physical border, but just digitally through email, and they pay me an amount that comes through into my bank account, right? And this also, they want these governments, they want to be treated as uh, transactions that are subject to tariffs. There can be some tariffs on this. So this is one way. Like, and another thing you can think about is the way you have in the 90s, you when you want to buy, you want to listen to a pop album, and you're sitting in India, you have to literally purchase that album from from the US, right? But now you can just switch on YouTube, click the video, and you can see that. So there is no transaction happening. A lot of these videos are free, and if some they are sold, you just pay a small amount to the platform, YouTube or something, and you get it. So this already is kind of on one from one perspective, you say that, yeah, consumers are gaining, but on the other side, the governments are losing. And if the governments are losing, we are all losing, because governments need some money to spend on welfare programs.
Very
So there have been some arguments on maybe there should be some tax on digital economy all over the world, and that is one kind of shortcut to what you just said. What you said about data, people should be paid for giving data. So if the companies are not paying, then they just get taxed, and then the tax money. Then the biggest thing the government should do is to earmark the tax revenue. Whatever tax revenue they're collecting from the digital economy should be spent on these people who are getting displaced because of digital economy, people who are losing jobs and so on because of digital economy, they can be paid from it. So that is another solution to this, potential solution to this. So I think this whole area is fascinating from both the business perspective and policy perspective, and a lot of things need to be done here. And
absolutely.
yeah, yeah.
Absolutely. No, you are right. I mean, this is something that should be at the top of everyone's agenda, because we are not talking about just humans losing jobs, and, people losing jobs and people not having anything productive to do. And if we just throw the universal basic income at them, they will have no purpose in life. They will not be fulfilled. Every morning the desire to wake up and do something meaningful, that won't be there. So whatever model we create, we need to create where they feel, pride, they feel part of the economy, they feel that they are contributing something important, for our coming tomorrow, or whatever is happening in the world. We cannot just tell them, okay, here is $1,200 or $1,500, go, live your life. That is not good enough. We need to give them a purpose. So we need to create a model that gives them a purpose, that gives them a feeling that they are contributing, even their own digital data, what they do, what they like, what they don't like, how they, spend their day, all that, digital data they are producing, that itself, will give them a desire to create their day-to-day activities in a more meaningful way. They won't be just feeling like, okay, let's just, go to movies, or let's go to beach and let's, just eat and, sleep. That won't be their purpose. To create more meaningful data, which will give them more meaningful, compensation, they will make sure that their day-to-day activities are more meaningful, that they exercise, that they do this, do that, that would be part of the digital data. So we have to keep the purpose in mind, that we need to make sure we give purpose to each and every individual. So there is a lot of opportunity here. You are right. And I'm glad that, you said that some countries have already started talking about it, because yes, the customs and, and every communication that is going through all digital, different, countries, digital boundaries, all that we have to restructure, how we can, make sure that everyone benefits from them, not just, few companies that have created these platforms, that they just make trillions. That is not the way to go, because then, the whole global community will fall apart, the global economy will fall apart. That is not the way to go. We need to create a model where there is a win-win situation for everybody, because governments will need revenues, to survive and to sustain and to provide all those, services that they provide to the, citizens. At the same time, governments also will need to be restructured. How we govern, how we create what models, a lot of things that we are doing right now, we don't need to do that way. Like voting, the elections are coming up, the people don't need to go to places where there are a lot of people. We can do digital voting. We can, we have to create new systems, new ways of doing things. So government is not excluded here. Just like businesses, governments will need to reform how they can, come up with the regulations, policies. That also needs to be restructured and reformed. So this is while this is a time of great crisis, this is also a time of enormous opportunity, because we will be able to redesign, redefine, reimagine everything, and we can come up with very effective ways. The 3D example that you gave is really very meaningful, because I and everything that we need in a day to day, we can produce, we can use the 3D printers, and we will be able to do that on our own. So we won't be needing a lot of factories. We can do all those things right at home with the 3D printers, with the IoT infrastructure that we will have across nations. We will be able to get a lot of intelligence, because we can place those sensors all different places. And even the pandemic information that we did not get this time, and which is a shame, because we could have used our technology, IoTs and AI, and we could have figured out much earlier where this is emerging, and we could have contained it. It did not need to be a global pandemic, but we failed in that. We didn't the problems that we should be solving, we are not keeping an eye on that. What are the most serious risks for the humanity? Let's focus those, and let's start solving those problems. The people who are developing all these technologies, they are not visualizing that what problems to solve. I have been talking about this for last 3.5 years, that synthetic biology and ability to purchase genes from anywhere, any individual. Right now there is democratization of innovation. Any individual can create a pathogen and
Hmm.
destroy create a pandemic. Any individual can create a pathogen and wipe out some other country's agriculture. Why are we not doing this? For last 3.5 years I have been talking about it, but people are not thinking which problems to solve, and that is a shame, because those things we need to be pushing now, that where we need to put our effort, so that humanity doesn't have to go through that, go through this pandemic kind of situation again. So having said that, what would you like to tell our global viewers and listeners, especially about your efforts, your initiatives, what you are trying to do? And if they have any question, if they have, like before we discuss this, you told me about, in our earlier discussion, you told me about the software that you have developed, which gives you an amazing ability to add it, to just change one variable and see what the impact it's going to be, where the changes will be. So what would you like to share all that with our global viewers and listeners?
Yeah, sure. No, no, thanks, Dr. Pandya. You put it so nicely, like whatever we discussed in terms of being having a purpose and how government should really think, and so on. I completely agree with you. And in terms of what I have been doing on these things, I've been doing a few different projects which kind of relate to some of the things we discussed. I'll first talk about the kind of broad ideas I've been working on, and then I'll come to the specific kind of software and models that I've developed, which can be very helpful on this. One idea I've been working on is about the future of work. So if work becomes more, if the industries become more automatic, robotics, automation, 3D printers, and all these things become a big thing. What happens to the workers? What happens to the workers of different types of skills? And what will happen to income inequality, because maybe the high skill are going to earn more, low skill are going to earn less. So how is it going to pan out? How the governments can intervene here, maybe investing more on skill development programs, so the blue collar worker who works in the factory can now operate 3D printer. So those kind of skill development programs, how much should they invest, and so on. So these are one set of things I've been working on. Second set of things are more like what kind of productivity impact and cost reduction impact can some of these new technologies have, like IoT or cloud or blockchain, AI, machine learning, all these things. how can they help specific tasks to be more productive, less expensive, and so on. And how that pans out for the whole economy. Like if you just talk about a new technology that somebody has developed for, let's say, reducing the time between production and delivery or something like that. What does that mean for the whole industry and for the whole economy? If everyone adopts the technology, what would be the effect? So I've been doing those kind of studies too, to understand how useful the new technologies can be for solving a lot of our pressing problems, economic problems, financial problems. And in that perspective, how much can we invest, because it's going to have so much impact on the society. How much should the government put in some money or some priority for these things? So that is another set of things I've been working on. Um, and also, another thing I've been working on is to bridge the gap between, the, as you rightly pointed out, the technologies and the decision makers, or the management leaders and those kind of people. Like right now, the disconnect we are seeing, like you rightly pointed out, on the whole thing spiraling into a global pandemic, is probably we have all the technologies. We don't have any dearth of technologies now, but then the leaders who we have elected, the political leaders, or maybe to some extent even the business leaders on the core traditional businesses, not talking about the technology leaders, but the the traditional, manufacturing, healthcare kind of leaders and political leaders, they have some kind of disconnect with the technologies. So I what I've been doing in a small way, in my own way, is to conduct some training programs where I can introduce technology to business leaders. And like you pointed out, the technology people who work on technologies, they're very fascinated about their programming and coding, and just gives them so much pleasure that they forget to think about the applications. Where can this be applied? Even even I can give you one example. When I was talking to a major blockchain developer company, and when I asked him, what do you think would be the economic impact of blockchain? He said, no, I think it will be very small because we are a small industry economically. So I said, that's not how it works. I mean, you may be a small sector, but you may have a profound impact on the economy, because economics is not just about dollars, but about the impact you can make on efficiency, costs, and so on. So I think that kind of awareness is missing among many technology people. So I'm trying to bridge this gap, conduct programs, training programs, where I have both the technology people and policy leaders and business leaders, so they can first of all learn from each other. Then I can give business perspectives and policy perspectives to technology people, and technology perspectives to the policy and business people. So that's another set of things I'm doing. I think these are the three broad areas that are relevant to, I think, our discussion today. And of course, I'm also doing, currently at the moment, I'm doing a lot of studies on economic impact of COVID, the current pandemic, and how are we going to face it. And this fits into my other work, where how economies are changing, the digital transformation is happening, how these things can be accelerated because of COVID, and so on. So that's another area. But these are substantive issues I've been working on. In terms of the technical models I've been using for this, I used to be an full-time academic before at Purdue University, and where there I had a team where we developed a model over time, which basically captures the interlinkages and interrelationships between different countries and different sectors. So basically, the model has the whole world, and it kind of captures the realistic complexities in terms of the data linkages. Like for example, if cotton is produced in the US, and it is exported to India, and in India it is converted into yarn and fabric in the textile industry, and then that is exported to, let's say, Bangladesh, and in Bangladesh it's woven into a shirt. I mean, it's kind of tailored or sewed into a shirt, and then that shirt comes back to the US. So this kind of I'm not saying that this kind of model can literally track all these things item by item, but at a macro level, you can see that, okay, the X million dollars of cotton is exported from US to India, and of that Y million dollars of cotton is used for producing textiles in India, that is exported to Bangladesh, and then Z million dollars from Bangladesh of shirt export gets exported to US. This context, like you mentioned, we have thousands of variables in the model capturing different parts of the economy. What happens to labor market, what happens to each of the different industries, how does trade work? Why would one country import more from another as opposed to a third country? These kind of things are all modeled here. So now, if for example the US Farm Bill decides to reduce subsidy on cotton, this may result in increasing the price of cotton because they are no more subsidized, and then that can lead to increase in input cost for Indian textile industry, and then further that can percolate into Bangladesh apparel industry, and then come back to the US consumer. So all these spiraling effects of one thing that happens in one part of the world can affect other parts of the world, and then come back and affect another part of the same country. So all these kind of interrelationships are captured in this model, and the model also captures the fact that there are limited resources. You cannot, just because you're putting in like $1 trillion of investment, you cannot expect 1 million more people to come for work. There are only so many people, and there's only so much natural resources you have, only so much land you have. So there are these constraints built in the model so that the predictions can be more realistic. So this model is called Global Trade Analysis Project, and it's in technical terms it's called a computable general equilibrium model. So it's kind of an equilibrium setting where supply equals demand in all the places, and then you change a variable, like you said, like for example, increase the subsidy. I told you, reduce the subsidy, or increase a tax, or change the technology. Say that okay, because of some technology, I'm able to reduce costs, increase efficiency. So you can tweak that part of the model, change one variable, and see the impact all across the world, all across different sectors. Like if you're increasing agricultural productivity, what would that mean for steel industry? Although it may appear from a common sense perspective, it may appear that, oh, why would agriculture affect steel? But there may be forward and backward linkages, because maybe if agriculture becomes expands if agriculture expands, then maybe you will buy more tractors, and if you buy more tractors or the other vehicles, other machinery used in agriculture, you're going to buy more steel. So these kind of linkages are captured in the model, and you can actually look at a lot of things. And this model it contains all the sectors and all the countries in the world pretty much. So this enables me to be very generalist. I can work on any kind of sector and any kind of country. At least I have the basis for the data and modeling relationships that is kind of off the shelf. And I can, of course, the model is not all intelligent, and so I have to combine that with my uh, further knowledge I can gather about a particular sector, particular country, and then enrich the model to make sure that it captures those things. And also, there is an effort I've been working on to combine this kind of models with cutting edge things like machine learning and artificial intelligence. So even this kind of models have been existing for a few decades now, and now I'm also working on kind of modernizing them, because these are relatively working with older parameters that we design. Like for example, I would have assumed the behavior of people based on last 3 4 5 years data, but now after COVID the people's behavior may change, their elasticities may change, and so on. So this I can actually compute real time using crowdsourcing of data, machine learning, and so on. So these are the things I'm currently kind of working on the kind of cutting edge of things. So to combine these kind of very rich traditional models, these are kind of traditional but already kind of modernized, a lot of new things there, but then make them further receptive to the new developments we have on computation. And so that is something I've been working on. And in terms of collaborations, I'm very willing to collaborate with anyone interested among our community in your group, and anyone who watches this video. If you have any questions on how certain changes that are happening, let them be policy changes, let them be business changes, technological changes, or maybe even this kind of pandemic kind of situation, disasters, natural disasters, how would that impact my business, or how would that impact my industry as a whole? If you have those kind of questions, and if you want to go in depth and analyze that, what is the future possible, what are the future possibilities, and so on, I'd be glad to collaborate and help. And it is more, if you summarize all these things I told you in a simple way, it is more like kind of model that can do some kind of futuristic thinking, ex ante, as we call it, futuristic thinking of strategic decisions and policy decisions that can be made using sound data analytics, basically. So it's kind of a combination of data and sound economic theories and a view of the future. So that's where I'm heading to, and I would love any collaborations on this.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Gopalakrishnan, for participating in Risk Roundup today. We appreciate your thoughtful insight on business implications of COVID-19. And our global viewers and listeners will benefit tremendously from the information you provided today and the summary that you gave about everything that you're working on, especially that model. It's going to be very useful because as every business, every industry moves forward, they would need to know where what implications they are going to have because of any changes that are happening in any part of the world, and they will have to redefine and redesign their products and services and systems. So that kind of model is going to be very, very useful. So even if a single individual or organization or nation is able to understand how to better prepare their business or their industry or their country based on the discussion we had today, this kind of dialogue has been of service, and we thank you for that. So risk.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Pandya. I really enjoyed this discussion, and I think it was a nice exchange of thoughts because you also shared a lot of your precious views on this, and I think it was a very, very enriching discussion for me too. I also learned a lot from this discussion, and I'm sure the viewers also will like it, and I look forward to many collaborations. So thank you very much again for.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Likewise. So Risk Group is a strategic security risk research platform and community. Our ecosystem is the first and only cross-disciplinary and collective community that is made of top scientists, security professionals, thought leaders, entrepreneurs, philanthropists, policymakers, investors, and academic institutions from across nations collaborating to research, review, rate, and report strategic security risks to protect the future of humanity. Add your voice to risk groups. Get involved to protect the future of humanity. Until next time, I'm Jayashree, host of Risk Roundup, signing off. See you next time. Thank you.